Clara Evans never dreamed of a fairy tale wedding. As an elementary school teacher, she believed in simple things: the spark in a child's eyes when they finally understood a tricky math problem, laughter echoing across the playground, or a quiet afternoon grading papers by the window. But that day, she wore a white dress sewn from 5 years of savings, walked the polished marble aisle of St. Michael's Cathedral hand in hand with her father, and thought maybe love could be found in the unexpected. Music floated through the air, the pews shimmered, and at the end of the aisle stood Nathan Coleman, the man she was about to marry. Looking like he had stepped out of a finance magazine, perfect, successful, composed. Clara didn't love Nathan madly, but she respected him, admired his decisiveness, the way he always had a plan for everything. When her father placed her hand into Nathan's, a note rang out, not from the string quartet, but from her gut. Then it happened. In the middle of the sacred ceremony, just as the priest asked the eternal question, "If anyone knows of any reason this union should not proceed, speak now or forever hold your peace," silence filled the cathedral, and Nathan exhaled. "I can't do this," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm sorry, this is a mistake." For a moment, Clara's world shattered into a million invisible shards. The light from the stained glass turned too sharp, the sounds too distant. No one stood, no one reached for her. There was only her, the white dress, and a rising tide of breath that felt like drowning without water, silent, invisible, but pulling her under. He walked away, leaving her standing in the silence, under the stunned gaze of hundreds of guests. No one moved. Clara stood frozen, her hands still suspended where Nathan had released them, as if she were something too hot to hold. A draft slipped through the open cathedral doors, making her veil tremble, as if even the air didn't know how to fill the suffocating silence. Then came a sound, soft but unmistakable, the loosened knot of a silk tie. Ethan Reed, the best man, tall, composed, once Nathan's closest business partner, stepped forward. Slowly, he undid his tie and looked up at the priest. His voice was low, but unwavering. "If she still wants to get married today, then I'd be honored to take his place." A murmur swept through the cathedral like wind through wheat. Ethan looked at no one but Clara. His gaze carried no pity, no arrogance, only one thing: sincerity. Clara was stunned. Her heart still ached from the shattering moment before, yet in the midst of humiliation, this man, someone she'd only known from the sidelines, stood not to rescue her, but to steady her, to offer dignity when hers had just been stripped. The crowd began to stir. A few guests stood, but Ethan remained still, his hands at his sides, simply waiting. And Clara, in her glistening gown, framed by fractured sunlight, finally looked up. Time didn't stop, but in that moment, everything seemed suspended. Clara looked at Ethan, not as a savior, but as a man standing before her with no demands, no expectations, only an invitation. A choice, a quiet bridge between a shattered present and an unnamed future. Her father stepped forward, his hands slightly trembling. "You don't have to do anything you don't want to," he whispered. But when Clara took his hand, she stepped forward. There was no music, no petals, but somehow the sunlight felt warmer. Ethan walked toward her, not rushing, but steady, as if every step was a quiet vow that she would never be made to fall again. They stood before the altar. The priest, after a moment of stunned silence, looked into Clara's eyes for confirmation. She nodded. So did Ethan. The ceremony continued, not as a rescue mission, but as a conscious, deliberate decision between two grown souls. When it came time for the rings, Ethan slipped off a simple platinum band from his own finger. No sparkle, no label, just a solid circle of unembellished promise. "I can't promise you a fairy tale," he said, "but I promise never to ask you to be anyone but yourself." Clara smiled, her eyes shining. "That's enough," she said. They didn't return to cheers or petals. No one snapped photos. No song played them out. But when Ethan opened the door of the vintage pearl-colored car for Clara, she didn't feel like a newlywed. She felt like someone who had just begun again. The house he brought her to wasn't a grand castle, but a stone estate, tucked behind crimson maple trees. There were no gilded gates or massive chandeliers, just gray shingles, a quiet rose garden, and a porch where the evening breeze whispered through aging wood. Inside, Clara found a kind of stillness she had never known. Ethan didn't share her room, didn't cross any lines. He only said, "Your room is yours. Your life is yours. I just hope to be a part of it." During the day, she returned to teaching. In the evenings, they shared quiet dinners, no obligations, no awkwardness. Sometimes they spoke of books she loved. Other times, they simply sat in a comfortable silence, where no one had to try to be anything. Ethan didn't try to impress her. He didn't shower her with lavish gifts. But every day, Clara noticed the little things. A book of her favorite genre placed gently on the table. A cup of tea waiting when she got home late. The porch light always left on for her. And in those quiet details, Clara began to feel her heart soften. Not love, not yet. Not a thunderous, sweeping kind, but a warmth. A quiet kind of safety, like solid ground after the storm. Peace didn't last long. One morning, while Clara was teaching, the principal called her into the office. On the desk lay 3 tabloid covers, headlines screaming in bold. Teacher steals groom, weds billionaire at the altar. Photos taken without consent. Her stepping out of Ethan's estate, walking beside him into a restaurant, blurred silhouettes lit by evening lamps. "People are talking," the principal said, voice teetering between sympathy and concern. "Some parents are calling. A few want to transfer their kids." Clara didn't cry, but shame surged like a crashing wave. She thought of every paper she graded, every child who trusted her, and now all that had been twisted into a headline she never wrote. Everything she had protected, her integrity, her reputation, her love for teaching, reduced to a cheap headline. That afternoon, as she left the school, a group of reporters swarmed her with microphones. She hadn't even reacted when a black Rolls-Royce pulled up. The door opened and Ethan stepped out, composed, as if this were just another Tuesday. "She has nothing to hide," he declared, voice calm yet sharp as steel. "If anyone should be questioned, it's those who abandon the truth." He walked to her side, extending his hand, not to shield, but to invite again, without pressure. And this time, Clara didn't hesitate. She took his hand, silent, under the relentless flashes of hungry cameras. That evening, Clara sat on the porch bench, the tea in her hands cooling as the sunset deepened. She said nothing, and Ethan, true to form, sat beside her, never forcing her to fill the silence. "You deserve to know," he said after a while. His voice was low and steady, like he'd been waiting for this moment a long time. "Nathan never intended to marry you." Clara turned to him. Her eyes weren't angry, just filled with a quiet, stunned question. Ethan explained. In the final months leading up to the wedding, Nathan had gotten into serious trouble with the board and questionable financial dealings. His relationship with a humble schoolteacher was the perfect distraction, a Cinderella narrative to mask millions in missing funds. "I have the evidence," Ethan added, pulling out a folder crowded with figures, invoices, printed emails. "Why didn't you say anything earlier?" Clara's voice trembled slightly. Ethan looked her straight in the eye. "Because if I had, you would have been thrown into a storm bigger than any scandal. And I'd rather be misunderstood than see you torn apart by a truth that cruel." Clara lowered her gaze. What rose in her chest wasn't just gratitude or pain, but something deeper, trust. Clara didn't cry that night, but sleep came to her like an uninvited guest, slow, heavy, and filled with unease. The next morning, before the sunrise fully touched the old slate roof, she awoke, quietly packed a few clothes, her worn journal, and the gray wool scarf Ethan had once wrapped around her shoulders on that rainy night. On the breakfast table, She left a small handwritten note. "I need time, not to walk away from you, but to return to myself. Don't come after me. If I come to understand my heart, I'll return." Clara didn't know exactly what she was seeking, only that inside her was a blurred space she couldn't name. How do you tell the difference between love and gratitude, between trust and dependency? She feared that staying would feel like a debt to kindness, not a decision born from freedom. And Clara had learned love that grows from gratitude alone is too fragile to last. The seaside town she chose had a quiet kind of beauty. Cobblestone streets, cafes lit early in the morning, and the sea, always murmuring something just beyond the gray horizon. Each morning, Clara walked along the shore, letting the cold waves touch her ankles. In the afternoons, she sat on the balcony and wrote, "Ethan, you've given me everything, but I can't stay unless I know my heart truly calls your name." Ethan didn't reach out, no texts, no calls, but every dawn the hotel's front desk brought her a local newspaper and a single red rose. No message, no sender, just a quiet whisper that he was still there, choosing patience over pursuit. Clara felt grateful, but also lost. On those long nights listening to the sea, she asked herself, if he hadn't caught me that day at the altar, would I still love him? If I hadn't been so broken, would he have stirred my heart? 7 days passed. On the 8th morning, Clara woke before sunrise. She stood in front of the mirror, not to fix her hair or makeup, but to really look at the woman staring back. In those eyes, there was no confusion, only clarity, not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet knowing of who she was. When the answer inside her no longer trembled, she returned. At dawn, quietly, just as she had left. The iron gates were open. The rose bushes she used to love were still there, blooming beneath the misty light. And so was he. Ethan was tending to the roses, sleeves rolled up, shirt slightly wrinkled, hands marked with small scratches. He didn't look up at once. When he sensed her steps, he paused, but didn't rush, didn't speak. Clara stepped closer. "Did they miss me?" she asked, gently brushing a petal. Ethan looked up. His eyes held a light she hadn't seen before, not desperate hope, but something quieter, more true. "The garden's been silent since you left," he said. "But I didn't change anything. I thought, if you came back, you might want it just the way it was." Clara smiled, tears gathering but not falling. She stepped forward, then again, and touched his cheek, an answer without words. They didn't kiss right away. There was no cinematic reunion, no sweeping music playing from nowhere, just two people standing in a dew-damp garden where roses swayed gently in the morning breeze. Ethan set his pruning shears on the bench. He stood tall, looking at Clara as if she were something too delicate to touch and too real to ignore. "I didn't wait for you like a hero waiting to be loved," he said softly. "I just hoped and tried to make peace with the chance you might not come back." Clara was silent for a moment. Then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the simple platinum ring, the one from that day. She took his hand and slipped it back onto his finger. "I didn't come back because you welcomed me. I came back because you let me choose. And now I choose you, not out of gratitude, not out of fear, but because I want to." He closed his eyes for a second, like he was letting her words settle deep into his chest. When they embraced, it wasn't a promise of forever. It was a quiet vow that their love would never be a cage. In that garden, under the soft light of morning and the gentle scent of roses, Clara no longer felt like the woman left behind. She was the one who'd been chosen, and more importantly, the one who had returned, not to be rescued, but to choose. Freely, finally, fearlessly. 5 years had passed since that misty morning when Clara came back to the garden. They never promised forever, but they kept choosing each other every single day. Now, in the ivy-covered stone house, the sound of laughter rang out each morning, clear and joyful like sunlight slipping through curtains. Their twin daughters, Ellie and June, were perfect mirrors of them both. Ellie with Ethan's thoughtful eyes, and June with Clara's mischievous, headstrong smile. Clara still taught part-time, spending her afternoons playing with the girls, tending to the rose garden, where the old wooden bench still stood. Ethan, though work remained demanding, always returned before bedtime, crafting bedtime stories from scratch and ending them with the same familiar line. And that's how love turns the ordinary into something magical. Their love no longer burned loudly, but its roots ran deep, like the old oak tree behind the house, quiet, strong, and all-encompassing. Every anniversary, Ethan still placed a single red rose on the kitchen table. No card, no words, just a quiet signal that he still chose her, as he did that first day. One early autumn evening, Clara sat in the living room reading, their daughters fast asleep. Ethan walked in, holding 2 mugs of warm tea. He sat beside her, said nothing at first, just watched her for a long moment. Clara smiled. "What is it?" Ethan shook his head softly. "Nothing. Just thinking about how far we've come, and how I still haven't gotten used to this kind of luck." Clara placed her hand over his. "We didn't meet to be saved. We met to be seen." Ethan leaned in, kissed her forehead, just like he had every night since they met. Outside, the autumn wind rustled the trees. Inside the old house, everything was still. But love was still blooming, without an audience, without fireworks, just in the quiet certainty of choosing each other, again and again. If this story touched your heart even just a little, don't forget to support us. Like, share, and hit that subscribe button to follow more unforgettable love stories, only on Noah's Stories. Got thoughts or feelings? Drop them in the comments. We'd love to hear your voice. Because here at Noah's Stories, every story has a soul. And maybe the next one will feel like it was written just for you.